It's going to be rough. Everybody says nursing school is hard, but it is very doable. I've seen people of all ages, with families, without families, do it, and it's all about mindset. There's definitely been times as a CNA where I've been made to feel inferior, and that's stuck with me, not in a negative way, but in a way that I'm like, well, when I'm an RN, I'm not going to have that same response to people.
Attention, attention. Code trauma.
Hey everyone, welcome and thanks for tuning in to Allied Health Mentors. My name's Eddie and today I'm sitting with Maddy Whitman. Maddy is a CNA, going to be soon nurse, and we're going to get into her story and how she started off in allied health and is now moving into nursing. But if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, click the like button. This is Allied Health Mentors, where we talk about allied health career fields, education, opportunities, so that you have the best knowledge to make that decision on pursuing a career in allied health and maybe just maybe pursuing higher education like Maddy's doing here today. So Maddy, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. How are you doing today? How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here, and
Awesome.
yeah, I'm feeling pumped about this.
Great. So you're in the States like me, but you're in the Midwest, right? Can you tell us where you're from, where you're at?
I'm in Missouri currently. I'm originally from Florida, born in Florida, but yeah, I've kind of been a little bit all over. I grew up overseas, but now back in the States since high school and throughout my college career.
Awesome. What's the weather like in Missouri? I've never been to Missouri.
It's very temperamental. They have a saying here that if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes and it'll change.
That's
So
funny.
it was very rainy, stormy when I first woke up, and now it
Hmm.
is bright and sunny outside and like almost 70 degrees.
Very cool. So Maddy, so the way I connected with you is over Instagram.
Yeah,
You are a nursing student currently,
yeah, that's correct.
correct? So you do have an Instagram. What's your Instagram handle?
My Instagram is almost underscore nurse underscore Maddy. So if you type in Maddy Whitman, it should pop up. But yeah, I'm almost a nurse. I get to graduate this May, and so I'm this close to having my RN BSN. So that's a registered nurse with a bachelor's degree.
Very cool. So what will you do when you become a nurse? Are you going to change your Instagram handle? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I need some ideas for changing the Instagram handle. I haven't. It'll probably just end up being something like Nurse Maddie, probably.
Yeah,
But yeah, definitely considering that.
you should put complete nurse or completely nurse Maddy.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out ideas. Um, so tell me, starting from high school, what made you want to become a nurse? How did you get into that nursing program? Did you have to do prereqs? What was that educational journey like for you?
Sure. As for what made me want to be a nurse, interestingly enough, I don't have anybody in my family with a medical background. I have an aunt on my dad's side who married into the family and used to be a nurse. But beyond that, everybody in my family has been like business and engineering. So I didn't really have anybody to help me walk through the journey. But I remember being in high school, and I was actually homeschooled through high school, but my mom and I were trying to figure out what I wanted to do for senior year. And I was stuck between choosing advanced physics or advanced biology, being anatomy. And I knew I wanted to do something science based, but I just didn't know what. And it was my mom who suggested, why don't you do anatomy and see if you want to go to med school or nursing school? And the longer I did it, I just started praying about it and it started to feel right. I really enjoyed my anatomy. I did really good in it. And so by the time we came back to the States, because I was living overseas at the time, came back to Missouri, and I finished out my high school and I started going to school here. And I applied to two or three schools, and I knew that they had an accredited nursing. So if you're ever applying for nursing school, definitely make sure it's accredited, because it has to be accredited in order for you to take the Nclex. It's very rare that an uncredited school will let you, the state will let you take the Nclex if you've gone to an uncredited school. So I started applying. I got into a couple of them, and the longer I stayed in my like nursing journey, the more it just felt right. I kept praying about it. It just felt right. The longer I was in it. And I remember I even had a moment during like, I think it was my first semester of nursing, and it can be really daunting. You go on the clinical floor. They don't really tell you what you're supposed to do aside from vitals and stuff and following your nurse. So you kind of have to figure out your role a little bit. And I remember just being super overwhelmed and intimidated. Ended up even having a patient that day who was like, I don't even know you yet, but for some reason I feel like I need to tell you that you're supposed to be a nurse.
Oh, wow.
Took that to heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa, I'm taking that as my sign that this is right for me. Prior to that, I didn't have a ton of resources. I didn't have anybody in my family who was a nurse. So I ended up turning to YouTube for a lot of my resources and to try to figure out what clinicals would look like. And that's kind of what sparked my Instagram and YouTube journey. Was I felt like a conviction that other people needed that as well.
Very cool. So that's interesting because I feel like when I talk to people in the healthcare field, it's because they had someone close to them
Yeah.
who was in the healthcare field, but you didn't. You kind of
Yeah.
discovered nursing all on your own.
Yeah.
It's definitely been a journey for you, it sounds like. And is being that you did grow up overseas, did you have any difficulty transferring credits over when you applied to college? Was that something you had to overcome?
Not really. They were pretty, so I'm in Missouri and they're pretty flexible here in Missouri in terms of high school credits and being
Mm-hmm.
homeschooled. So I ended up doing a couple of my classes online. So I got a transcript from them. Plus, my mom and I created a transcript based off of the curriculum that I had. So we ended up being able to send that to like the National Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and they approved
Mm-hmm.
it and gave us a full transcript. And it wasn't a problem. I just had to take the SAT. I know they take the ACT here in the Midwest, but I already
Mm-hmm.
and everything transferred, no problem.
Awesome. And I wonder how that's going to play out because, pre-COVID, not so many people were homeschooled, or at least not traditionally. So I wonder
Yeah,
if more and more students and parents will have to look into making those transcripts. And I'm sure it's a
that's
concern about school, but that's good to
mm-hmm.
hear. Um, Great. So nursing, so you decided to get into this program, you got in, you've been pretty successful. Have there been a lot of ups and downs? Has it been kind of like a roller coaster for you?
For sure. I think the biggest bump is going from taking your prerequisites to your actual nursing courses. So, for the most part, at least in my program, you take 3 semesters, 4-year degree. So, you take it like a regular 4-year bachelor's degree. So, what my program does is you take 3 semesters of prerequisites. So, that includes typical electives like public speaking and English, but then you'll also take precursors to nursing school, such as chemistry, anatomy and physiology, microbiology, and I think pathophysiology was one of the other prerequisites that I had. And once you have all of those, then you can apply to the program. So you can take all the prereqs, but then you apply to the actual BSN or ASN program. So taking the prereqs, having my GPA, and they also did. I took the HESI test, but the exam that most people are doing these days is the TEAS. And you had to take that as a precursor as well. And once you take the test and all your prereqs, your current GPA, you send that all in, and then you get in to nursing school essentially. So the
Awesome.
biggest transition was in those prereqs like anatomy and chemistry. It's a lot of nation, a lot of brand new learning experiences. And then once you transition into the nursing courses, it's a lot of critical thinking. It's not just black or white. You're given kind of a patient situation and you have to think your way through it and pick the right answer. And everybody likes to joke that nursing questions are like a basket of oranges. You just have to pick which one's the most orange. So all the answers are correct, but which answer is the most correct?
That's a good point. And I've heard that for like EMTs.
Yeah.
I interviewed one of my good friends who's an EMT on this channel, and we talked about the same thing that, which one's the most orange, which I think is a great analogy.
Yeah.
Um, Awesome. And so the reason that I wanted to have this interview with you most of all is because during your program, during your nursing program, you decided to get a position as a CNA in the hospital that you're currently working at. Why did you make that decision, and why is it important to you to be that CNA first?
I think I'm the way that I did it ended up working out for me. I think I would recommend to most people to start out as a CNA. That way you can the feel for it, decide and juggle that on top of nursing school, because there were definitely people in my program who already had a family, who were already married, who already had kids, who were already working a job. So being a CNA wasn't necessarily possible for them to juggle at the same time as nursing school. But I have some CNAs. And I think after I went through my first semester of nursing school, a lot of what I had learned and needed to get better at were taking vitals, basic patient care, giving baths, things like that. And I have a video on that. But I think being a CNA helps you get those skills down really well. And after I'd been a CNA for a couple of months, I was able to get comfortable with being around patients. And it wasn't clinical days that I had to be like, oh, I got to interact with patients today and try not to look nervous or shaky. I was already doing it consistently. And I had a feel for how the nurses worked and different floors worked. So, like med surge versus ICU. And yeah, it just made nursing easier because I was able to focus more on higher level skills such as starting IVs, doing catheters, medication administration, and things like that.
So Maddy does have a YouTube channel. I believe it's Maddy Whitman, right? Is your YouTube
Yeah.
channel where you have nursing videos. I was just looking at the banner earlier, and it says nursing and minimalism, which I think is
Yeah.
cool. But in your latest video, and the one that made me reach out to you, is you talk about your CNA experience and how you didn't do it traditionally. I think traditionally, like you said, someone will go and attend a CNA program, but with you, it was a little different. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, most hospitals, I don't know whether or not every hospital, but most hospitals will actually consider your first semester of nursing school as equivalent to being certified as a nursing assistant. And that's because in your first semester, you're learning all those basic skills, how to take vitals, how to do a manual blood pressure cuff, um, and how to do a bed bath and things like that. So you learn and you basically check off all those skills in your first semester of nursing. So when I applied to be a CNA, I was like have to take the exam and do the coursework and whatever required. And they said, well, do you have your foundations and first semester of nursing on your transcript? And I said, yes. And they're like, well, just send us that and that. And I'm like, well, hot dog, that's awesome. So if anybody's looking to do that, then sometimes doing your first semester of nursing school, you feel for it and whether or not you can juggle the two. But it was a great option for me. I was able to kind of bypass some of that certification. I learned it anyways. And then staying in that job on top of doing nursing school has been super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen some positions like that out here in California. Sometimes it will be under CNA, and it'll say, CNA program or first semester or second semester of nursing school. So I think those positions are out there. I think people, they see a CNA job title, and they don't click on it if they don't have the certification, and so they never get that
Right.
knowledge of like, oh wait, I'm in nursing school, I can do this. Instead, they might go and pay for a whole new program. So thank you for talking about that. Being that you are a student and you're working, I've always told people that hospitals are a great place to work in because they run 24/7. You can do per diem shifts, you can work nights, and a lot of times they're very welcoming to students. How has that experience been for you, balancing school schedule and just getting the support from the nursing staff?
I think it's been pretty much exactly what you just described. They are very welcoming towards students, especially because they kind of want most of us to work with them afterwards. And we kind of get the feel for what they're wanting a little bit better too. Most of us are pursuing an RN degree. But yeah, my managers have been really great and flexible with my schedules with nursing school. They definitely offer PRN, part-time, full-time, day or night shift positions. So it's really versatile. You can work a couple different floors. They're all a little bit different pace too. Some are more slow some are more fast paced. But yeah, it's been pretty smooth for me. And it hasn't been too hard to juggle because I have been able to kind of work around my nursing school schedule and go from part-time to PR and back to part-time when necessary.
That's awesome. That flexibility is great. And in
Yeah.
that video that you shot, the video we're talking about, I believe you're on night shift, right?
I'm actually on day shift.
Oh, are you? I thought you're on night shift.
No, it's just so dark when I get to
Oh,
work.
okay. That makes sense.
Early and I leave when it's pretty late at.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes okay. Sorry. So
It probably does look like night shift.
yeah, well, because it's dark in the background and you're in the parking garage, so that's why I thought it was night shift. I was gonna ask, do you prefer day shift or night shift? Do you have a preference?
I've worked, I think, 1 or 2 night shifts, and they're just so different from each other. But I like both of them. I think currently being in nursing school, I prefer day shift just because it works with my schedule better. I don't have to bounce back and forth. But I think once I've graduated, I wouldn't mind working night shift. I liked there's just different vibes on night shift, and a lot of people will tell you the same thing. But as for a nurse just starting out, you don't get a whole lot of admissions at night. So I think starting on nights and really getting to work on your skills and not feeling like overloaded with visitors and admissions and discharges and stuff, you can kind of get under your belt a lot of the skills, and then you can add on the others if you swap to day shift. Not that they don't do admissions or discharges at night, they're just less frequent. So it's one less thing you kind of have to get used to or learn.
Definitely, yeah. I think I prefer night shift when I've worked in hospitals, just because, like you said, it's different. The people who work the shifts are different. It's a lot slower at night, kind of. And like you said, you can work on those skills or work on things you need to do. But also there's less, visitors, so the hallways aren't as busy. The elevators come by faster. So I think that's great for people to consider, that you have the option of working either one. And if you don't like one, just switch to the other. So I think that's awesome. Being that you are in nursing school and you're working alongside nurses, what's that like? Do you watch them and kind of critique what they're doing, or are you there more like learning and like invested in asking questions? What's that like for you?
I think it's a bit of both. I think if there's learned, your textbook is super helpful, but real life is not like your textbook. I think you always have to keep patient safety in mind. So I've never seen any of the nurses do anything that was outside of textbook that could potentially harm a patient or that like violated HIPAA or something like that. Definitely done things that are outside of what you learn textbook wise in nursing school. And sometimes it's the most beneficial thing for the patient. Sometimes it's just due to what real life and real life pace looks like. It doesn't always run at the pace of exam questions and things like that. I know all my exam questions, they're posed like you're the only person in the room. You've got half an hour to be with your, and sometimes they're just not always realistic. So I think at first I was like, ooh, I don't know. That doesn't sound like how I learned it in nursing school, but everybody's different. Every nursing school is different. And I to really appreciate everyone's different style of care. One interesting thing I've noticed with the nurses, and especially doing my capstone clinical, which is my final clinical, where I do full 12-hour shifts, like 3 days a week, like paired with the preceptor, which a lot every school, but it's something my program does, and I really appreciate it. The thing I noticed was that a lot of the younger nurses are very task oriented and good at getting done really quickly. And then a lot of the older nurses have more of that in-depth knowledge and critical thinking and just kind of a different perspective. So both of them are great, but it was just interesting for me to see that dynamic going on. And then definitely while in school, I really appreciated being able to work with the nurses because I can ask lots of questions. I get to see things firsthand. We talk about something in school and then the next work and be like, I just learned about this. It's really interesting to see it play out, see how the nurses respond to it. For example, like we learned about different arrhythmias that you see on the monitor. And then the next day I went to work and I work in a cardiovascular ICU unit. I saw the same arrhythmia, and I'm like, oh
Mhm.
shoot, this doesn't look great. But then to see everybody's calmness in response to it
Mhm.
was really interesting and definitely stuck with me. And I'm like, oh wow, it's really cool to see it pan out compared to
Definitely.
just talking about it in a classroom.
No, I think that's very important because when you see that practical use, it helps you understand. And I'm sure, someone who might not work in as a CNA never gets to see their textbook or their test information in practical use. And so you kind of just it's like learning math, right? It's like, when am I ever going to use this, right? But if you're able to see it in person, you retain that information better. So I think that's great. So you do your clinicals at one hospital and then your CNA work at a different hospital, or are those completely different?
I actually do them both at the same hospital.
Okay.
That's part of the reason what drove me to get the job where I'm at currently, was because I did a couple clinicals, rotations there. And then I'm like, it probably would benefit me if I ended up working here. And sure enough, because I did that too, I actually have a job as an RN at the same hospital because I got that exposure. And they're like, hey, it's really hard for nursing students to get hired in ER and ICU right off the bat. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
recommend doing med surge, which is great. Got nothing against it. I just know that the ICU dynamics are a little bit more, what I vibe with, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
That's a
Um,
good adjective.
yeah. And so because I had already worked there as a CNA, they looked at that during my
Mm-hmm.
interview and on my resume, and they're like, oh, we know this person. They've got a good background. Yeah, they can work in the ICU. And I ended up getting an ICU job before I even
Oh wow,
graduated.
that's awesome. So I want to talk about your job, but first, is it hard for you? So when you're a CNA, your scope of practice is CNA, right? So like when you're there and you're
Yeah,
working as a CNA, you can only do what a CNA can do.
right.
Is that
Yeah,
right? Okay.
that's true. I can't do, if I don't have my student badge on and I'm not doing clinicals, then I have to do CNA work, which can
Mm-hmm.
sometimes be hard, a little confusing, but the nurses have always been great to show me their skills. So I can go and I can watch them put in a catheter, or watch them give a med. And sometimes just seeing it enough times sticks with you. And it feels like you kind of get to do the skill, but vicariously through someone else.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then back to you getting that RN job. Tell me what that was like. How did it come up? So just so I understand, so once you pass your program and your NCLEX, then you're allowed to work as an RN. Is
Yeah,
that how?
and
Okay.
some hospitals are different. Some will actually let you work as an RN prior to getting your NCLEX,
Okay.
but at least the hospital that I work at, you can work as a graduate nurse resident, is what they call us,
Mm-hmm.
GNRs. So I can work as a GNR either for 90 days or until I get my NCLEX results back. So if I don't have NCLEX results after 90 days, then I get bumped down to a CNA. And if I don't
Hmm.
pass the NCLEX, I get bumped down to CNA, if that makes sense.
No,
But
that
if I
does make
do
sense.
pass and I'm still within the 90-day limit, I can continue to work as a G.
Awesome. And how confident are you in taking that NCLEX? Because I know some people might take it multiple times or wait. Like, do you have your NCLEX date already? What's that going to look like for you?
I don't have my NCLEX date yet. Typically, so you can typically register for NCLEX prior to graduation. So I am registered, but I cannot schedule my NCLEX
Hmm.
until the state board has my transcripts. So most places you have to graduate and have to send in your transcripts, and they have to receive it before they give you your ATT or approval to test. And once you get your ATT approval, then you can schedule. So I'm
Okay.
registered. That way I can schedule right away when I'm ready. And usually you get your ATT about a week or two after graduating. So as soon as I get that, I'll be scheduling it. My GNR program starts in June. So I'm going to
Mhm.
try my best to take the NCLEX prior to June.
Awesome. That's great. And I'm sure you'll pass it because you have study tips on your YouTube channel. And, I'm sure you know what you're talking about there. So I'm fully confident that you're going to get it. Um,
Thank you.
and
I'll feel a little bit of that confidence
yeah,
the
no,
closer I.
I believe in you. I believe if I had to put money on anyone else and you, it'd be you every time. So you got it. Um, Going back to your CNA experience. So do you feel like working this allied health? So let me back up a little bit. So me being in allied health and me working, amongst CNAs and phlebotomists and X-ray techs, there's always kind of that separation between nurses, right? Because it's like it kind of almost feels that you're a little lower or that you're not as high as a nurse. So how do you think that'll affect you moving forward? Do you think it'll make you a better nurse? Will you be more considerate? Will you understand issues on the allied health level more? Where does that bring you to?
I definitely think it's changed my perspective. I think in terms of delegation, which is something that we learn in nursing school, as an RN, you're allowed to delegate to CNAs, which is probably part of the reason why it feels like, I know being a CNA, there's definitely been people that I've met who've made me feel inferior, although I feel like radiologists and radiology techs and transporters, phlebotomists, I feel like we're all doing healthcare. We all couldn't work without each other. So
Right.
I feel like we're all on the same level, even though we have more skills compared to the other person or different skills compared to the other person. And there's definitely been times as a CNA where I've been made to feel inferior. And that stuck with me, not in a negative way, but in a way that I'm like, well, when I'm an RN, I'm not going to have that same response to people. And when I delegate, I'm going to make sure that I'm really working with my CNA, because even though I have the ability to delegate and ask them for help and ask them to do things, I still need to be considerate of their time, because most CNAs have somewhere between like 3 to 10 patients, depending on what floor that they're on. So they may be in the middle of doing something that's more important in terms of like helping transport a critical patient to somewhere, or feeding somebody who hasn't been fed yet, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's definitely made me have more respect for other people who are kind of within the same scope of practice as I am.
Okay, great. And then I don't think we've talked about it, but what kind of responsibilities do you have as CNA? So as a CNA, so I know in your video you go through some of them, but just very briefly, like what are some responsibilities you might have during the day?
Sure. Well, one of them is definitely taking vitals. I'm on the ICU unit, so I don't have to do that. Like someone on med surg does. They usually will have a vital sign card and come in, I believe every 4 hours, depending on hospital policy, and take blood pressure, temperature, all the normal things. For me, everybody's attached to a cardiac monitor, so you can already see respiratory rate, blood pressure, and heart rate. And so I will go around and I will take temperatures, oral temperatures, or depending on what machine they're hooked up to. Sometimes you can get a core temperature, but I will usually write those down on my chart and chart it for the nurse. Um, I usually start my mornings by getting a report from the night shift CNA, and then I go around and I'll update boards based off of how often their blood sugars need to be checked, what their eating status is, their assistance like getting out of bed status is, whether or not they're being discharged that day. And then I'll go around and a lot of being a CNA is making beds, making sure temperatures and vitals are taken. We can do minor procedures, so I can take out IVs and fully catheter. Um, I can go in and help people get dressed and do kind of their activities of daily living. So brushing their teeth, helping them get dressed, things that you might help with someone in a nursing home, for example. I can on the intake from people's meals and output if they have a catheter. Um, and then I get to chart those things. So I can chart temperature, intake, and output, whether or not their bath's been done and things like that. And then something special to my unit is that they really strongly encourage open heart patients to walk very frequently. So it ends up being my job to walk with a lot of the patients, depending on what their assistance status is.
Okay, awesome. That's a lot of responsibility for you to have, and then to have a floor. Are you the only CNA on shift?
I
Or
am, because we're a very small unit. I'm
okay,
typically the only CNA.
interesting. Okay, let me ask you a question. So I used to be an intern, and I used to do kind of like CNA work.
Yeah.
And I was on a cardiac floor, and one time someone asked me for coffee, and I was like, "Wait, I don't know if I should give them coffee because of the caffeine." And you're on a cardiac floor. Is that something that comes up?
Yes. I know it's weird because sometimes the surgeons are picky about it and sometimes they are. It just kind of depends on the surgeon. For the most part, they need to stick to a low sodium and they need to stick to decaf. So usually I will get people decaffeinated
Okay.
coffee. they can tell the difference, then I will probably ask the nurse or the doctor if they can have caffeinated based off of what. Because usually they'll probably go home and drink coffee anyways. That sounds terrible, but for the most part, yes, we give them decaffeinated, we give them, and we do a carb consistent diet, which is interesting because most of the patients that we get do have diabetes. That there are a lot that don't, but because of their major surgery, their blood sugar levels go way out of whack, and they end up being put on insulin drips to prevent diabetic ketoacidosis. So basically just way too high blood sugar, and that slows down healing. So we have to make sure that their meal tray is carb consistent so their blood sugars don't spike.
Wow, so it
and
sounds like
to help them fill out their menus, which can sometimes be a little difficult when they want the sticky bun, but they can't have the sticky bun.
Oh man, so you're that person. That's
yes, unfortunately.
That's funny. Well, it sounds like you know your stuff. That's awesome. Before I let you go, where do you see yourself going with this nursing? I know we're talking about it a little bit off the recording, and it sounds like you have a lot of adventure, and you don't have to say all of it because I'm sure you want to keep that content for your channel. But what do you see yourself doing, and where does this career going to take you?
I definitely will stick with the ICU for a bit and get a lot of skills under my belt and experience. But after growing up overseas, it's definitely on my heart to go back overseas and do part-time like medical missions trips and go to places where they really need healthcare and potentially work with a team or even one day organize a team myself.
Wow.
Yeah, medical missions is definitely in my heart.
Is BSN it for you, or do you see yourself becoming a nurse practitioner in the future?
At the current moment, with graduating around the corner, I definitely have senioritis, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I ever want to go back to school, but I know deep down that I do want to go back to school and probably receive either a master's. You can take two avenues in nursing school. You can either get a PhD, which is like a research, your typical PhD degree, or you can get your doctorate of nursing practice. So I would probably aim for a doctorate of nursing practice. But we'll see how life pans out and where it takes me. I'm just riding the wave.
Well, it sounds like you're on the up and up, so I think that's great. You have a lot ahead of you. Talk to me a little bit about your YouTube channel and your nursing channel. I mean, I'm sorry, your YouTube channel and your Instagram page is what I meant to say. Where do you plan to take that?
Absolutely. Well, like you said, my base is nursing and minimalism, and something that I've adopted back is the minimalist lifestyle. I guess I just didn't see it as list until I got onto YouTube and Instagram and saw other people finding it as minimalism. Like, oh, well, I already do that. I can share some content about it. So I see that, more of that in my future. But right now, nursing is the number one thing that I'm doing. And the reason I started it was because when I started nursing school, there were a lot fewer resources on YouTube and Instagram for nursing school, applying for nursing jobs and things like that. So I felt kind of compelled to kind of share the same things on my channel and my nursing journey, which obviously won't be the same as other people's, but at least it gives them a sneak peek. And as I like to say, it's almost like you get to shadow me without actually getting to shadow me. So hopefully I can do the same thing as my CNA video when I'm an RN and kind of give the people a sneak peek into the job if they want. And then I also share like tips and tricks for like taking the Nclex, kind of what I'm doing to study, studying tips, and kind of like day life hacks anyways as being a college student. So that's where I see it going, is to continue the tips and tricks and information and kind of the shadowing.
Great, yeah. And after talking to you today, I'm excited to see what content you bring out, because you have a great story and an amazing story that I think a lot of people can learn from. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Last question is just if you have any advice or anything to say to someone who's looking at this, maybe in high school or maybe contemplating nursing school, what advice would you give them?
I would definitely tell them that, one, you should shadow. If you have the opportunity, go and shadow, because I was able to shadow at least once prior to nursing school, and it definitely encouraged want to go and do it. So definitely shadow. It's going to be rough. Everybody says nursing school is hard, but it is very doable. I've seen people of all ages, with families, without families, do it, and it's all about mindset. You can make it work if you want to make it work. So it's very doable.
Well, that's great advice. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Maddy, for being on here. Thank you for
Thank you for
collaborating
having
with
me.
me. Of course.
Absolutely.
Guys, if you haven't already, go ahead and check out Maddy Whitman on YouTube. And your Instagram handle one more time, almost underscore.
Underscore nurse underscore Maddy.
There we go. So I'm going to put that just below you. There you go. I'm gonna put it there, your IG, so that people can follow you, because I think it's great what you're doing. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with us through this interview. I think it was a great one. Again, this is Allied Health Mentors. We talk about allied health professions, careers, educations, so you have the best options and best knowledge to pick those options. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maddy, and everybody have a nice day.